For the abstract, in common industry, pitot tube are common device that used to measure flow velocity. Pitot tube is one of the device that has in Bernoulli theorem. There is a lot application that use pitot tube as main device. Besides that, we use Bernoulli theorem to calculate velocity using pitot tube as a device.
Assalamualaikum. Today I'm going to present the introduction. Bernoulli theory states in fluid mechanics that any increase in the fluid velocity occurs concurrently with a decrease in static pressure or a decrease in the potential energy of the fluid. It was founded by Daniel Bernoulli. The theory of Bernoulli can be generalized to different types of fluid flow, resulting in different versions of equation of Bernoulli. A flow meter is used to calculate the volumetric flow rate or mass flow rate in various types of application. There are a few flow meter can be used, such as venturimeter, the orifice plate, pitot tube and dial tube. We decided to choose pitot tube as our group assignment. The pitot tube is used to measure the flow velocity of the fluid. The tube is measured in the flow and the difference between the stagnation pressure at the tip of the probe and the static pressure at the side of the probe. The problem statement of this assignment is the longevity of application pitot tube in real life. The objective is to study the advantages and disadvantages of pitot tube, identify the specific usage of pitot tube in real life application, and the last one is to examine the precision, time response, and the accuracy of pitot tube in real life application.
In 1931, Henry Pitot was invented pitot tube to calculate moving liquid or air velocity. Pitot tube tests two pressure, first differential pressure to total impact pressure. Pitot tube pointing directly into the fluid flow. Pitot tube pressure may be determined as this tube contains the moving fluid is brought to rest, stagnant as there is no outlet to allow fluid to continue. Pressure is fluid stagnation pressure, referred as total pressure or pitot pressure, particularly in aviation. Flow velocities that measure in industry also those that flow in ducts and tube that measure by pitot tube. Pitot tube is the most practical instrument to use. This pitot tube is appropriate for an open stream of liquid to a free surface to determine the velocity. Pitot tube in aircraft. Assess the airspeed, Mach number, altitude and altitude pattern of an aircraft. Errors in the reading of the pitot static system can be highly dangerous since information obtained from the pitot static system, such as airspeed, is potentially safety critical. A failure of pitot static system has been traced to many commercial airline accidents and accidents. Stagnation pressure equal to static pressure plus dynamic pressure. For calculation, we can use Bernoulli equation, which is have U, Pt, Ps, rho, delta H, Pl and G. Supersonic velocity measurement, there has PO2, P1, M1, M2 and F. In these studies, we're gonna use Bernoulli equation, but for general knowledge that supersonic velocity measurement also can be used in aircraft. They do not contain any moving part and routine use does not easily damage them. Pitot tube are small and can be used in tight space that other device cannot fit into. Disadvantages for a material using fluid can easily clog pitot tube and disrupt normal readings. Major problem that has already caused several aircraft to crash and many more to make emergency landing.
Second type of pitot tube is pitot static tube. Pitot static system use the principle of air pressure gradient. Pitot tube works by measuring pressure difference and using value to assess the speed and altitude. This pressure can measure by static port for the static pressure, and number 2 is pitot tube for pitot pressure. Pitot static tube also obtain pressure for interruption by the pitot static instrument. Pitot static tube connect to manometer for use the testing of variation system. Second page is the formula for find flow on the disc. K is constant, PS is static pressure, PI is impact pressure, and this is the figure for pitot static tube. Advantage and disadvantage. Number 1 is advantage. There are inexpensive device. Number 2 is they are easy to install. Number 3 is they produce only a small pressure loss in the tube. And number 3 is they do not interrupt the flow. The disadvantage is due to the small pressure, there are only suitable for high velocity fluid, and number 2 is they can measure the flow rate only at particular position. Number 3 is they easier become blocked when used with fluid carrying particles, and number 4 is it produces a very low differentiation pressure. The next is the third type of the pitot tube, which is pitot tube on the boat. Number 1 is have L-shaped tube. Number 2 is tube is mounted on the boat near the bottom of transom. Transom is the behind the boat, behind space on the boat. Tube is directed toward the water flow in direction which the flow travel. End of the tube is connected to a pressure gauge, which is to measure the stagnation pressure on the fluid. Stagnation pressure is the static pressure on a static point in fluid flow. How to find stagnation pressure? Stagnation pressure, this is the formula for stagnation pressure, formula for flow velocity, and formula for Bernoulli equation. This is the figure for L-shaped pitot and system pitot tube. Advantage and disadvantage. Number 1 is advantage. Due to its small size, it can introduce the fluid flow shutting down the flow. Loss of pressure is very small. Disadvantage is it require high velocity flow. And number 2 is sensitivity disturbed by flow direction.
Okay, let's begin our calculation. This is the solution for first example, which is calculating the velocity of an aircraft that is flying at 3000 meter height. Firstly, note that point 1 is at the entrance of the tube, which the opening is parallel to flow, and the point 2 is the entrance of the tube, which is normal to flow. Here is the application of the Bernoulli equation between point 1 and point 2, and do the substitution to find the velocity. Not to forget, we must note that the velocity of an aircraft can be determined by simply measuring the differential pressure of a pitot static probe. Next, calculating the velocity of air when the manometer shows a difference in head of 5 cm of water, and using basic amount of density for air and water, assuming the coefficient of the tube is 0.98, so that we got the velocity of air flowing through is 28.86 meter per second. Lastly, here are the example for an aircraft that traveling at speed of 300 km per hour. We note that the velocity of wind against it is 20 km per hour. At first, we calculate aircraft velocity, then continue with wind velocity, so that we can combine both answers to calculate the relative velocity of plane. And then, by using the answer, we can get the velocity recorded by pitot tube. By solving this, we can get the value of h, which is the head of air, to get the pressure by multiply with the specific weight, that is 12. So the final answer is 5032 Newton per meter square.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad Aimadina bin Muhammad Fuad, and now I will present about discussion. Okay, the application of pitot tube. There are 3 pitot tube that we have discussed. The first one is at the aircraft. The second one, the static tube, and the last one is on the boat. Okay, the first one at the aircraft is used to measure the speed of the aircraft. The second one is used to calculate local flow rates across the cross section of a pipe, and the last one is used to measure the speed of the water and the pressure of the water. Next, the advantages of pitot tube. The installation is inexpensive, can be easily installed due to its small size, can be easily removed from the pipeline. And lastly, disadvantages of pitot tube. No standardization, not so reliable when dealing with sticky and dirty liquid like in the sewage. sensitivity can be easily disturbed by flow direction. Thank you.
As the conclusion, pitot tube is the most important device to measure velocity. There is a lot of application of pitot tube widely used in aircraft industries and commonly in a speedboat. The accuracy of pitot tube given an advantages to aircraft industry regarding safety and control system. Pitot tube also have its own disadvantage that can cause failure to aircraft industry. Pitot tube also widely used in ducts and tubing because its own advantages. Some prevention is needed during using pitot tube in order to counter disadvantages.